Hey guys, this is Fluff and Stuff. Today we're going to talk all about the approach to matchmaking. We're going to get into the psychology of it and some practical tips that I have to make your experience better. Before we start, I just want to say that this topic is extremely large and broad, and for the sake of time, I will condense it as best as I can, while being as descriptive as I can, because you guys know that I like to rant. If you're interested in hearing about any particular topic, just leave a comment down below, and I'll definitely consider going into more detail about it. So first, I just want to go ahead and list out some of the things that we're going to be going ahead and talking about. Number one, we're going to be talking about roles. We're going to be talking about how do they play a factor into your pubs, your mentality, how they should shape you, your strategy within the game. We're going to talk about how pubs differ from competitive metas, how they intersect as well. Adjusting behaviors to your goals. So not only how you actually perform in the game and what your strategy is, but what your mindset is as well. We're going to be talking about the anxiety aspects of, queuing up for a game sometimes can be difficult, or people are simply afraid to queue. We're going to talk about overcoming that. We're going to talk about the statistics, how you can find an edge in your game outside of actually playing. And then we're just going to talk about general communication tips and habits that you can form to make your games a lot more pleasant. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into it. First of all, roles. Roles are the most important thing when it comes to Dota. Just, the moment that you go into your pub, you know that core players expect to be picking their heroes last, supports are expected to pick first, and if you didn't know that, now you know. So, when you get into the game, typically you want to make sure that you're picking your 5 position as your first pick, and then generally you're just going to go in descending order between your 5, your 4, 3, and then the 2 and the 1 can sort of be interchangeable based on which heroes are revealed and how comfortable those players feel to pick the heroes. For example, if sometimes people pick mid heroes earlier than your team, your mid player should be able to decide what hero he wants to play, because lanes tend to form a pretty huge bias in terms of what heroes that you actually want to pick and what kind of advantages you can get. And outside of that, it's not extremely important. So if you can identify situations like that, just say like, hey, hey, the guy already picked Invoker, go ahead and pick TA, or you know your matchup. Let me pick last so that I can get an advantage in my lane. This would be an example of healthy communication. So another thing about roles is that you want to be flexible. You can't just simply pick 1 or 2 roles only and expect to do well in matchmaking, because you're going to be stepping on a lot of toes. A lot of times people will feel that you're an inflexible player, and make sure to note that when they deal with you in the future. Sometimes that can tilt them even further. But generally, come in with a couple roles that you're willing to play. I would say 3 is a healthy amount, but ideally you should be able to play the majority of them. Either way, try to pick a variety of roles, including 1 support role, whether it be the 4 position or the 5 position. Just be able to swap. This will allow you to kind of maneuver in between your pubs and be far more consistent. You're not always going to get what you want. Speaking of getting what you want, you need to make sure that well, hold on as I lower the volume on this, my bad. Yeah, speaking of getting what you want, it also depends on the rank. You need to be mindful of the ranks between yourselves and your party. If you're the highest rank, then you should definitely try to get one of your main roles, as that's your best role, or the role that you expect to win the game in or have the most consistent effort with. If you're on the lower end of the spectrum, you should definitely consider supporting or playing an off role, because the people ahead of you are there for a reason. A lot of times people feel that if they're not playing the role that they want to be playing, then they're not learning. But in fact, you can learn from much better players than you. Please, please, please allow the higher ranked players to pick what they're most comfortable with, because that's going to allow you to have a much higher win rate overall. And then if you're in the middle of the pack, just kind of pick whatever you need to do to fill, or put your marker down as soon as you get into the game. Don't be flip-floppy, don't be AFK. Make sure that you're there, declaring pretty much what you intend to play, and then let it sort out with a little bit of communication. All right, so that's just my brief rundown on roles. If we will be able to talk about that more in the future. Understand what the differences between pubs and competitive matches. So, in a competitive match, teams have the advantage of being coordinated, the advantage of pressing onto timings much quicker, and much more efficiently. A lot of times in your pubs, you need to understand that they're going to go late, and the way to play the meta in the late game is generally just having these two heroes that will farm up BKBs, be able to put out lots of damage, and then have a lot of setup. This just means tons of forces of initiation disable. Make sure that those heroes can hit in the late game. Make sure that they feel comfortable and that you can punish mistakes by blinking forward. That is pretty much the way you're going to play. In the competitive scene, you could probably get away with a lot less initiation, a lot more team fight, and get away with that. But I feel like most generally in pubs, you want to play stably and consider that your game will go late. Another aspect of roles that I forgot to mention is that each role sort of has its own playstyle, and that you should be well versed in the strategy behind it. So, as a 5 position, well, overall in the general landscape of Dota, you want to be dominating the lanes, because even if you have heroes that will scale past the lanes and potentially have very good matchups late in the game, you need to leave that to your core positions and generally build your lineup around winning the lanes. The supports are generally the biggest factor in that, but of course the cores also have the ability to counterpick lanes at times. Not always. Sometimes they have to pick first, but lane should be probably one of your highest priorities in the game. Lanes will give you the advantage that you need generally to not only tilt your opponents out of, even playing a normal game to begin with, or number 2, just giving you that advantage where your team's able to farm and control more of the map and also make the first move because you're feeling much more confident. All right, so back to the roles. The 1 position basically should just be farming nonstop. You do want to come to fights where you get easy kills, but generally you want to focus on your timings, focus on your items, focus on being huge. That's going to be the biggest benefit for your team. Number 2 position is pretty much the same thing as the 1 position, except you're going to be expected to show up to more fights. Make sure that your hero's able to put out a lot of DPS, not just, you can't just pick a hero that will fall off in the game. You need to pick something that will scale as a form of magical or physical DPS, or both. For the offlaner, it's generally a mix between these utility heroes that build items that help the team, like Crimson Guard or Pipe. But again, I kind of stress these a lot less in pubs compared to the other one, which I'm going to say is the heroes that kind of initiate. Heroes like Beastmaster, heroes like, in the past it would have been like Clockwork, not so much anymore, or Shakers. You get the point. Heroes that will initiate into the game. The advantage of this is that you're able to have that source of initiation going into the game where you can punish mistakes, and generally as those heroes you don't feel the need to farm and take space away from your 1 and 2 position, and this helps set up a much cleaner game because your team's able to rotate, you're off map, it puts pressure on the opponent, and you can also make plays as well. The 4 position generally should be the hero that secures a lane. Both supports are generally the same thing, but the 4 position obviously has the ability to roam. I think as a 4 position, you want to be able to identify lanes where you can help. Most generally right now, you want to be helping the dual lane situation, the off lane, securing the offlaner's game, just making sure that he's able to play, because the offlane can be extremely difficult these days. And then as the 5 position, generally you want to support your safe laner. You don't normally get to see what you're going to be playing against, so you want to be picking heroes that are just overall strong in the lanes. Heroes like Undying, heroes like Vayne, they're going to be good all the time with a large majority of the cast of heroes. All right, so speaking of heroes, you want to be able to determine what's good. Make sure that you're picking somewhat in the meta unless you're extremely confident with some kind of off meta hero, but in general you want to be picking heroes that people expect to see. This is also to feed into the psychological aspect of when people see things they don't necessarily like or they think that's off meta, you're gonna tilt your teammates from the start. So you need to be aware of that fact and play around it. As well as generally people do place a lot of conviction in the heroes that they do see in competitive games. It does help when they see pros playing it, or when it's a really common pick in your pubs. And we'll talk about how to find the heroes that are actually good once we get into the statistics component of this guide. Alright. So, behavior is really big in Dota. Behavior pretty much defines how you will succeed in the game, like outside of your individual skill. And there are many players with good behavior that will climb simply because they're pleasant and they know how to deal with conflict, and they're not being like a leech on their team, draining everyone's energy, arguing all the time, and being pessimistic and toxic. Alright, so if your goal is to be a professional gamer, like a lot of players do feel this way at the higher ranks, yes, you will need to have a somewhat alpha personality. And if you don't, you're going to need to cultivate that as well. It's important that you get the roles that you feel like you're going to perform the best on, or that you're practicing on, that you want to be notable on. And a lot of times for people, that's kind of the mid heroes, the core heroes, and generally the lower in the number of the role it goes, like the easier it is to get your hero. But that does come with some pros and cons. This is okay. It's okay to be somewhat toxic as a pro gamer, and that is somewhat controversial. However, I do believe that you need to have somewhat of an ego to cultivate the strength to push through and to consistently like keep grinding and keep that self-confidence about you. So that is okay. If your goal is to improve, which I think that's a large majority of the population, you want to set broad goals to like wanting to improve each day, or getting your item builds or timings much more precise and more fluid. You want to avoid specific goals because they're very dangerous. A lot of times when you have a specific goal, like, oh, I want to be top 100 or top 50 or whatever it is, the closer you get to that goal, the more your emotions will play into it. You're going to start feeling fear. You're going to start feeling anger. You're going to start revenge queuing when you lose. You're going to start feeling frustration. And paradoxically, if you feel those emotions, there's a chance that you will be there's a much higher chance that you'll be an asshole in your game, the exact person that you're not trying to be. When it comes down to if your goal is to learn, or if your behavior if your goal is to learn, you want to come inspired. You want to watch replays of pros you enjoy, and not just the competitive games, but also their pub games. You want to take your game to the next level, and you want to love the process. So one example is, I've been playing Chen for, pretty much since Dota 1, so that over 10 years. One of my favorite heroes. But at a time when I wasn't feeling as confident in my Chen, I decided to watch Puppy. Puppy's one of my all-time favorite pro players, and I watched his pub game of Chen, not even in a competitive game. I saw what he was doing, I saw what he was microing, watched his player perspective. I saw how he was manipulating the lanes, how he was controlling creeps, etc. And this gave me a positive frame to come into the game with. I had like an objective for how I wanted to play, or what I wanted to mimic, and then after mimicking it and learning kind of mastering the ideas and the strategy, then that's when I apply my own spin to it and then create my own playstyle. And this is probably the number one thing. When you're inspired in Dota, the sky's the limit for how much you can learn. Getting inspired all the time is huge. Find that person that you really love watching and love playing, like copy them, to a T. All right. So, mentality. Make sure that you know that in Dota you cannot always win. In Dota, compared to other games, it's a much more fair game, I would say, because in Dota, your personal skill can go a long way, and what you bring to the table can influence your win rate significantly. If you think about it, comparing it to other games such as Hearthstone, in Hearthstone, some of the best competitive decks generally yield around like a 60% win rate, or even less. Sometimes the best decks can have a 55% win rate. And I think it's a good comparison to draw because there's all these different counters and different heroes, different classes to play. Just like in Dota, there's different heroes and matchups. But the difference is that in that game, you have to think about RNG as a factor, whereas in Dota, RNG does play a little bit of a factor, but it's mostly in the people that you play around, or the people that you get queued into matchmaking with. So think about Dota as in the long run. Think about if I maintain a 55% win rate in Hearthstone and I play a million games, I'm going to get to Legend if I play consistently, right? In Dota, a lot of the top pros, they can maintain 70% win rates, 60% win rates. Over the long run, you will get there. You just need to make sure that you're not tilting yourself emotionally. And this is why I say those short-term goals, like I want this top 100, is not good because you're going to psych yourself out. You need to just make sure that you're playing consistently, not trying to resort to gimmicks like, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. Of course, there's another way to do it, which is if you want to get there as soon as possible, you might think to yourself, okay, I'm just going to play the most broken hero possible. However, I think if your goal is just to be on top for like one patch, that's fine. But if you want to be a pro player, if you want to be just a good player in general, you're gonna want to just adapt that long run type of strategy where you can play lots of different roles, be flexible, and you don't find yourself playing 2 or 3 heroes and unable to adjust if the meta ever changes. It's just a shortcut that's not going to benefit you in the long run as a Dota player. Okay. Make sure that also you consider cutting losses quickly, and that kind of ties into also not revenge queuing. So a lot of times, if I notice myself losing a couple games in a row, a lot of times I'll think to myself, oh, maybe I need to get that MMR back. I need to get that MMR back. But the thing is, when you're in that position, a lot of times, and I've seen my friends do this as well, where they'll just keep queuing one after the other. 10 games go by and they've lost like 9 out of 10. And they feel even worse than they did before. And they have this pressure on themselves emotionally that they're down 25, they need to make that 25 back. It's just I really recommend taking a break after maybe 2 losses at most. And also for cutting losses quickly, you can also stay positive, keep your green, keep that plus 25. If you're up, if you say you had a winning streak, sometimes it's best to just end it. I would really recommend taking it day by day. You're not going to get to your desired rank or to the place you want to be in one day. It is a long-term process, so take your wins each day, try to learn from it, and then try to come back inspired. Don't just burn out spamming that one hero, spamming that one strategy, or just being too emotionally invested in each win. I also want to talk about statistics. So statistics are another edge that you can use to inform yourself. When it comes down to statistics, you want to use a couple of different tools, but personally what I do is I track my own statistics on a spreadsheet, which is basic things such as heroes, roles, performance on carry, for example, as well as like my support statistics. You learn a lot of interesting facts, as well as the heroes that you do play and how well they perform. So one interesting fact that I learned when I tracked my own statistics is that when it came down to playing Rubik, one of my best heroes, one of my favorite heroes, and one of my most played heroes, I realized that I only maintained a flat 50% win rate, even though I've had days where I win like 5 Rubik games in a row, or days or weeks where I just win every Rubik game and maybe just lose one. The thing is that over the long run, you kind of start to see that, well, based on this information, it seems that Rubik's not really that high of a performing hero for me, It's possibly due to the fact that, well, his laning phase is quite weak. He can't really support the lanes, and lanes are really important. Sometimes there's no good spells to steal, or you're just hard countered simply by heroes like Lifestealer just running at you, just bursting you down before you can do anything. And comparably, there are heroes like Skywrath Mage or Windrunner where I've played them 4 or 5 times, but my win rate's like 80% plus. And perhaps if I want to win games, I need to look to the heroes that I'm actually performing on. So always look at that. You don't have to track your own stats personally. You can always use Dota buff. Go ahead and just go to your player profile, sort it out by a recent date. Don't use your all-time statistics because obviously as you grew as a Dota player over the years, those statistics become less relevant. Generally they tell you how good you are at a hero or if you're competent at a hero, but you want to know specifically now in this meta, in this patch, how am I doing? And what heroes can I play to give myself that advantage? Just like I said, in Hearthstone, if you have a 55%, 60% win rate, you're golden for Legend. Find that hero that you have 55%, 60%, 75%, even 90% at times where I've had heroes like Chen. I play him 15 times, I win 90% of my games. Those types of heroes are going to get you where you want to be. There's also another nice program called DotaPL.us, so Dota Plus. It's a extension or overlay that you can download from overwolf.com. It'll inform you of what your opponent's most played heroes, like your top 3 most played heroes are, and their win rates with them. So at times you won't be blindsided by heroes that, or by players who pick things like Techies or Broodmother or Meepo. This is really especially helpful, but as well as when you're playing, you're going to be building relationships and understanding, you're going to start seeing really similar players throughout your games, and just try to keep track of what they play and do not be blindsided by some of their specific heroes that they play that are just extremely annoying. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the Dota buff meta in a second, but because I need to display that on my screen, I'm going to go ahead and talk about something else real quick. I'm just going to finish it up. So as far as anxiety goes, people always say like, Fluff, how do I don't even want to press find match. Like, how do I queue? I have so much anxiety about the games. Like, I just stop myself before I even do. Well, the answer to anxiety is just action. Just press the button. If you find yourself hesitating, don't give yourself that time next time. As soon as you get into the game, if you want to play that game, press find match. Don't even think about it. Don't look back. Don't cancel it. Don't think. Focus on something else. As soon as find match happens, just press it and go. This is the best way to get over it. The more that you experience this, the easier it will get. But at the very beginning, if you want to play and you feel like you just can't get into it, just press the button. Alright, so also dealing with the inevitable assholes. This also plays into the statistics thing. Well, this also plays into the long run win rate thing. In Hearthstone, there will be RNG, right? Like sometimes someone top decks a card that just completely swings the game. Sometimes the matchups that you pick up are completely impossible, or the win rates are sub 30%, whatever, the favors are just stacked against you. Think of that as the players that come into the game with these tilted personalities that just want to lose the game from the get-go. They will just run down mid. The players that simply won't cooperate, they don't want to play the game whatsoever. That's going to happen. That's going to factor into your win rate, and you need to anticipate that. So basically each day when I play matchmaking, I'm like, I'm pretty much due for a game thrower. I'm pretty much due for a lever. Anticipate it and don't be surprised that it happens. Just think of it like this. Let it end as soon as possible. Let your opponents finish the game. Sometimes there's literally no way to win. And yeah, just accept that as part of your win rate. Nobody in Dota 2, even if you're the best player in the world, nobody has 100% win rate. Sometimes as well with these assholes, you can continue playing, and a lot of times your team can still win the game. Still play it out if he's not like destroying his items or intentionally just like ruining the game beyond repair. Like if he's the kind of person who's just being toxic and still sort of passively playing, but not really. Sometimes you can just push through that, and that'll significantly up your win rate as well. Don't be somebody who just gives up instantly. You need to make sure that you like identify the difference between those situations, whether it's a game that you physically cannot win or a game that your team can 4v5 and then possibly inspire that player to come back and play the game. When it comes to dealing with assholes in general, communication tip is you want to just mute people. Like, I know that you want to argue. I know that there's this whole ego thing where you want to put people down because they're just being so stupid, right? It's generally never positive, and there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, you're just adding more toxicity by being negative towards them. Even if you're trying to be constructive, it's gonna take the focus away from the game for a lot of your teammates and potentially, you know, just distract yourself, really. Like, you're not going to be playing the game just trying to convince someone who's obviously unconvincible. And even at that point, it's not even worth, even if they were convincible, sometimes it's not worth the effort. Just go ahead and mute them and continue playing the game. Anytime that you feel like you want to like make a negative comment back, just mute them, because by showing them that you don't care, they're probably just going to talk to themselves, or they might just stop. You know, it's far better for that situation to happen than for you to like clog up the communication and just pretty much seal the deal. Like, a lot of times these situations are salvageable. I also recommend using chat wheel, having some kind of, you know, relax, you're doing fine, don't give up. These sort of things, they will translate across the different languages, and you can also use it as your mute. Like, you know, you mute someone, you just use that to communicate with them. Those can go a long way. I've seen it. Like, especially when people, it's kind of like forgiving someone when they make mistakes, or forgiving the game. Just don't make people feel like you're judging them. Just play the game and try to remain positive. As far as being positive as well, using well played for momentum's sake is always good. Well played should be used when your team does something good, when a player makes a nice play when you're down or even ahead. Just concentrate on keeping the momentum. And also, the other button I would suggest is like the OK/affirmative or yes. Just having a button to acknowledge people as well is very useful. When you acknowledge somebody, it helps them feel that you're listening to them, and then they're more likely to listen back to you. When people talk to you, or when people talk to others, and it just kind of seemingly like flies over their head, or they don't acknowledge it, the person who said it doesn't like feel that they were actually being heard, and that can discourage them and really cripple your communication. So I really recommend being responsive and just having that button there to make sure people know that you know what they're talking about. This will avoid a lot of miscommunication and weird situations that you want to avoid. And yeah, just generally you want to stay positive, make friends, not enemies. If you're going to say something negative, just keep it to yourself, mute that person, and let it go. The last thing before I get into the statistics side of this is streaming. So for some people, streaming is an option, and streaming can be a really nice tool for your mentality, because streaming is partly a commitment. So when you go into streaming mode, you're going to want to be constantly pressing that find match button. You're going to want to constantly be thinking about your audience, and also it helps you share kind of the experience of the pub with others, because I know that for some people they fear being judged. So like, if their friends or people from the outside see that their win-loss is like, you know, they had like 5 losses in a row. Why are you losing 5 games in a row? Are you a bad player? You might think. But when you have the game streamed, it helps you feel that others understand what you've been going through. Sometimes you play 5 games, and 5 games someone ran down mid. You can turn that situation from something that you experienced solely, that's kind of, it's extremely frustrating and it can make you very angry, into something more comical where everyone's witnessing it. They know that this person's being a clown. this person's being ridiculous. It's like, okay, yeah, there was literally no way to win that game. I'm sorry, that was fucked up. Like that. That really helps you get in the mindset where you can brush off these losses or these things that are out of your control and take them kind of, on the cheek and not get so serious about it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get into Dota Buff really quickly. I just want to get into this and show you something that I do for pubs. So when I look at heroes, I always check onto the meta, like especially when I'm playing matchmaking. So I always want to reference Divine 5 because the rest is a lot less useful information. So I'll sort it by win rate and by pick at one point. So by win rate, you look at this, like Visage, 58.74% win rate. So this is saying across all stats, every player, like in Divine 5, 58.74% players are winning with this hero. That's ridiculous. Back in the day, heroes with a 55+% win rate were considered top of the line. Right now, we're actually experiencing heroes that can win far more than the averages because these heroes have been tuned for competitive play, but at pub play, they can really shine, especially in the right situations. So look at these heroes like Huskar, but also inform your decision based on your experience. Like Spectre at a 55%. Spectre has always been on the top of the win rates for Dota heroes, so you want to consider that as a fact. The same thing goes for Zeus. You want to look at what heroes are being played competitively, what heroes in your experience are winning, and then inform your decisions. But look at the statistics to kind of generally see who's performing and who's not. And this can also help you with your own hero pool. Like compare your win rate to the average and see if you're beating the average or not, and whether you have an edge statistically or not. And then also heroes that you potentially might overrate. Heroes with sub 50% win rate generally are not considered overpowered. Like Rubik, for example, he's picked in 22% of games with a 49% win rate. So that means if you pick Rubik, generally you're just going to win less than 50% of the time, which is not what you want. You want to be winning more than that. So if you do pick these heroes, you want to pick these heroes in situations where you feel like they can shine, not just everyday heroes. And you want to factor that into the pick order as well when you're playing your pubs. Like if you're playing a carry, if you're playing a support, it's way different. As a support player, like I said with that Rubik, if you somehow you get to pick that support hero later, you see like an Enigma, you see a Magnus, go for it, man. You're gonna increase that win rate tenfold. But if you have to pick first, pick in Rubik, weak laning stage, weak win rate, you're gonna be shooting yourself in the foot to begin with. Try picking heroes like Undying, who have a plus 53% win rate. You're gonna be a lot more stable. You already know he's strong in the lane. Bane, 54% win rate, strong in the lane, etc. So, and for carries, you can kind of go down a different line of thought. Just like if you see the counters, go for it. Okay, so also pick rates. Pick rates kind of define, the more that something gets picked, generally the less win rate it has overall. That's just kind of a law of averages. So you need to take that in consideration, but also think about how, if a hero has like for example, Dark Willow, 22.58% win rate, or pick rate with a 52.40% win rate, that actually means the hero is quite good right now. Because if pretty much everyone's picking it, and you see it in a lot of games, and it's winning more than 50% of the time, you're golden. That means that's a really good hero right now. So always think about that, okay? And just translate that across different heroes that you want to research. Okay, so the next thing is trends. This is another thing that's very, very underrated. So as soon as a patch hits or as soon as people start figuring out heroes, you need to look at trends to determine if something has fundamentally changed or something has boosted a hero to the next level. So again, Undying. This hero, in my opinion, was always quite good. And in my patch analysis, I wrote that I think with the new changes, I felt that he might be very powerful. So we already see this week is plus 3.44% win rate, which is, if you've been studying Dota buff and once you get used to it, you're going to start to learn how these heroes kind of work around each other. But plus 3.44% win rate up to a 54% win rate currently from 50% is a massive, massive jump. This means that this hero is something that you should be looking to pick, something that's going to be trending in the meta. Be ahead of the meta. Be ahead of what's going to happen. Also, heroes like Chen, Wisp, Windrunner Arc Warden. This is a massive change. 40% to 47% is huge. I mean, this is the kind of hero where you're not picking it first, and the fact that it went up by 7% means something is actually working for him in the patch, and it's up to you to figure out what that is, or to observe and or experience what that is. So, you know, with this hero, you can pick him like last two. If you're an experienced Arc Warden player, this is your time to shine. You know what I mean? And then also heroes like Lone Druid. We see Lone Druid picked in competitive games, but you can see here, yeah, his win rate went up, but overall 39% win rate. Part of the reason why is because, like I said, it goes late game. You're not going to be able to scale a lot of times, and a lot of times if the game goes later and your team's not as coordinated, it's hard to pull off a Lone Druid. Whereas, like, again, with the late game situation, the Spectre, you know, they just buffed Spectre again. Spectre 59.89% win rate. That's like, that just, you know, it goes late. If you can somehow get through the laning stage, you know, this hero is going to be really good for you. Think of like Badman when he went rank 1 on EU just spamming Spectre, etc. So yeah, I'll sort by change and observe the trends. Pick rate is somewhat important. Not something that I really think about, but you can see here the change, like Axe. Yeah, his win rate didn't go up quite high, but he was already winning a lot of games to begin with. His pick rate's going up, so you know that this hero is something that you can start looking into, start to expect. It's something that, you know, will be a presence in your pubs. Just be ahead. And then also you want to sort by current, noting that some of these heroes have been here forever, like Spectre, Zeus, and Wraith King have been in the top 3 for pretty much like the past 4 years, 5 years even. So just keep a note of that. But if you see anomalies like Axe, for example, being this high, Axe hasn't been this high in so long. So you know that Axe is potentially a very, very like amazing hero right now. And also right there you see changes. So there's also the reverse side of this where, so Ricky Maru, he got buffed with Tricks of the Trade, the last patch. So his win rate went up quite substantially, up to 57%. I noted that it was quite imba in my pubs, like just the attack speed of the Tricks of the Trade, making him feel a lot more viable. They did nerf it, so you can see how that affected his win rate right now, -3% down to 53. And yeah, this is showing how tuning and changes affect heroes, and you want to just go through these every once in a while to keep up with the meta, but especially on patch days, because on patch days you'll see these swings. Like, I remember when Lycan got changed for the first time, like, or when people started building Helmet Dominator as well, his win rate shot up like 10%. So when you see things like that, that's how you get a competitive advantage. All right, so I also have other videos on this, how to use Dota buff in more detail, but this is kind of like the least I can say about it. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I tried to be quick. Thank you for watching. Please follow me on Twitter and Twitch TV at FluffDota for both of them. Make sure to also subscribe to the YouTube. And yeah, hopefully this is helpful. I know that like sometimes I'm not as good with my wording. I'm gonna work on that. But hopefully that the information is good enough to help you understand and get an advantage in your pubs. And I try not to stop myself, and I just let it run with the recording so that you guys are able to, you know, I'm not going to filter this information from you, and I don't want to stop and keep recording and just like miss over my initial intent. So thank you very much. Thanks for understanding, and have a good day, everybody. This was my video on approach to matchmaking. Again, just in the comments, if you want to know more about a specific topic, let me know.